Hi, today we're going to talk about some of the tags that you may find extremely useful as you go and try to add blocks of code and simple snippets of different things to your web page. I know that it can seem overwhelming how many tags there are in HTML5, so today I'm going to try to break down some of the most useful ones. Now, I realize it may seem overwhelming as I start throwing all these elements at you. You're not supposed to memorize them all by the end of this lecture. Instead, I'm really just trying to give you a taste for what's out there so you can start playing with your own code. So one of the first things you need to decide when you're coding is which tags are you going to use. There are the generic kind of what we call block tags, paragraph and div, that break your code into nice sections. Paragraph is kind of self-explanatory, and div gives you a way to put groups of content together. But the problem with both div and paragraph is that they're very generic. So we want to move over to the idea of using these semantic tags, such as header and nav, footer, and figure. And we talked about those in an earlier video. Some of the other block tags that you may not be familiar with are listed here. The first one are the containers. Containers are simple things where you can put like-minded code together. So you might have an article or an aside, a section, main. Again, they almost seem generic in their names, but as you grow more comfortable, as you're designing your website, you can start to see like, oh, this isn't a generic section, this really is an aside. The next block tag is HR, or horizontal rule. And it's really an interesting idea because it doesn't contain any text at all. Just to remind you, block tags are tags that have the display block. It means it forces a new line above and below. There's never going to be anything next to it by default. So our hard rule will just put a single line across your page. Simple, yet very, very much used by many people. The next one is address. This will go ahead and be a block tag, and it doesn't format your address any differently than other text, but what it does is it allows screen readers and other assistive devices to quickly and easily find if they're looking for your address. Block quote would be another block tag, as well as details. Now, the details tag is very interesting, and it's kind of cool if you can get it to work. And what it does is it allows you to kind of have this drop-down open and close idea with your text. Now, just to warn you, it is not implemented in Firefox, so if someone with Firefox tries to run it, it's just going to kind of default to this open idea. All right, so there's HR, address, block quote, and details. I've told you what they were. My guess is you still have no idea what they really do, so let's take a look at a quick example. So here would be an example of the HR element. It's just a simple line across the screen, nothing too fancy, but very recognizable. The next one, the address element, in this case, the browser does italicize what's inside the contents. I had to put my own end line here, but otherwise it just looks kind of italicized. But you can't be sure that it'll be italicized on every browser. It's really specific to Chrome, Firefox, Safari, etc. But the important thing to know is that there's semantic meaning here. Here we have a block quote, and what block quote does is it indents the code and kind of lets people know that there's a quote that you're looking at. One of the things I put inside my block quote was I put in a cite tag so that someone can know right away that I've cited Napoleon Hill. So if someone's doing a search for Napoleon Hill, this is going to up the chances that a search engine will link back to your page. The last one, details, is kind of combined with a summary tag. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and you can see that it opens and closes. So the default is to have it closed and then open up when someone clicks on the little arrow icon right here. Now, one of the things I mentioned is that it's not supported on Firefox. So if you're looking at this page on Firefox, by default, you're just going to see it in the open context. So let's go ahead and go back to some other tags that aren't block tags. We're going to do some inline tags. Again, remember, inline tags just means that you can put it into the page and go all in a line, one after the other. You don't need to break things up. So span was the original inline tag for plain text. You would put span around some code, and then you could go ahead and style it any way you wanted to. Now, in addition, we have cite, abbreviation, time, code, and then the subscript and the superscript. Now, if you're watching closely, you may have noticed that I left a little typo after abbreviation there, so make sure you go ahead and put in the less than or greater sign. But let's look at examples of this code as well. Here I have my inline elements. The cite basically makes it easier for people or bots to search your code. So I went ahead and put this code right inside a cite tag. Now again, this particular browser happened to style it differently, but that's not always going to be the case. Another new tag that has come along recently is the abbreviation tag. So if you notice, right along here, I've included abbreviation inside the box. Now, if you can, watch what happens when I put my mouse over the Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. As I hover over it, it's very small probably on your screen, but you can see that the expanded version of the abbreviation pops up. So I have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Now, from an accessibility screen point, it can actually go ahead and read the expanded version. But even for people who aren't using screen readers, I actually find that you need to do something to let people know that hovering over is even an option. Most people wouldn't think about that. The time attribute is another one that is just inline, and most of us won't even know it's there. But it allows you to give extra semantic meaning. So the party starts at 9 p.m. makes perfect sense to us. But the party took place on New Year's Eve. Notice again, that's actually a time. Even though it's not our typical numeric time, it is a time. By putting in different time tags, it's also much more likely that if someone's accessing your site on a mobile phone, it'll pop up as knowing that it's a date. Sometimes you would like to be able to identify parts of your code as code fragments. This happens to me all the time because, I'm a computer scientist. So the code elements tend to be displayed in different font, but it's not always the case. But code is just a nice way to break it up and let people know, what is this crazy stuff people are typing? Oh, it's code. It's not supposed to make sense. Finally, the last two are subscript and superscript. And these are used to create, a lot of times, mathematical formulas. So you can see here, I've raised up the 3 and I've lowered down the 2. So I've given you kind of the general block tags, the general inline tags that people use. And there's other tags that people use quite often that you may see when you're looking at their pages. The issue with these tags is that they, when I say, need more. It's really weird to use these tags unless you're also incorporating them with JavaScript or some other elements that you probably don't know a lot with yet. So these include the button, the meter, progress, iframe, BDO, which stands for bidirectional orientation, and then the map attribute along with area. Now, people really like these, but they tend to need JavaScript. So I'm going to show you a quick example, but I'm not going to include the fancy add-ons you would need to use them because that's not what this course is about. Right now, we're just learning these tags. So let's take a look at them so you can see what they look like visually and understand that they're not actually functioning yet. So my special tags that need more, I've called it. I'm a little worried that you might not even be able to see it because it's so light and screen, but you can see I've included some open and close buttons. They don't do anything, but they look really nice. So go ahead and put them in if you want, but it may confuse people that they're not actually operationable. The next one is meter, and you've probably seen this before. Basically how this one works, let me actually bring up the code for this one. Window. You can see for the meter one, I've actually gone in here and put in meter, minimum value of 0, maximum value of 100, and my current value is 50. So you can see it's colored in until about pretty much halfway through. All right. Same here with the next one. I've set it to 25%. Here, I just wanted to show you that it doesn't always have to be 0 to 100. You can start at 5 and go to 10, and I've set it to 8, which is 60%. So that's kind of how the meter works. Progress is very similar to meter in that it shows kind of a proportional value. Now, with progress, you're expecting that you're doing something where eventually you'll get to 100. So you've taken surveys before where as you filled in, the progress bar fills in. Again, both meter and progress tend to use JavaScript to update them. The next one I was going to show you is iframe. iframe is used to net content within each other. It is not equally well supported by all the browsers, so you'd really want to explore who can use it and the best way to use it. And you would definitely want to look into options such as height and width. So right here in my iframe, I've said, hey, let's go ahead and link back to my page. And it puts my whole web page inside this little block of the page. Down here, I went ahead and said, hey, let's do that iframe again, but this time, let's go ahead and have it take up a much bigger width, all right? Now, one thing you can notice is I can still click in here, I can do all the things. It's as if I have a web page inside of a web page. The last one, oops, let's go down here, I want to show you is the bidirectional orientation. And this one would be something you would use if your particular language tends to not just go from left to right and instead goes right to left. So bidirectional orientation takes either RTL, which stands for right to left, or LTR, which stands for left to right, and you can go ahead and put in the text. So here is my going from left to right, and here's the same thing going right to left. I didn't really give examples of the map with the area because, again, this is one where you would really need to understand JavaScript to really embrace what it's doing. So I realize I went over a lot of tags with you just right now, and some of the code you probably understood and some of it you didn't. But all the code is online, so you can go ahead, you can download it, you can play with it, you can change it, all right? But as you code, you're not supposed to go in and be like, oh, I'm going to try to use every possible tag I can to show how much I know about HTML. No. Use the most specific tag possible. Whenever you're not sure, go ahead and ask somebody else. Say, what would happen if I were trying to look at this page with my eyes closed? Would I understand what's going on? The second thing you need to understand is that sometimes your tags just don't work. Now, there are two reasons that your tags may or may not work. The first one might just be you have a syntax error. So make sure you run your code through a validator, and that will help you find places where you haven't closed tags. This is especially important if you nest tags, meaning you put one inside the other. The other thing you really want to do is you want to run your code in multiple browsers. So even if your page looks great when you're running it in Chrome, make sure you check it out on Firefox. If it looks great on Safari, make sure you check it on Chrome. It's really important that you make sure that your pages can be reachable to the greatest number of people possible. And really the only way you can do this is by keeping your code simple, succinct, and you're always validating. Thanks.